We will call this COG CEEPC committee meeting to order at 10:02. Thanks for everybody for being prompt and present. I appreciate it. So this is our final meeting of the year. Just to remind everybody, I'm Sarah Bagley, Vice Mayor from the City of Alexandria, and this is actually my last meeting as chair. So I wanted to just say thank you first off to staff. I'm sure all of you are aware of how much the staff work goes into preparing for these meetings, preparing me for these meetings, making sure we have great content, making sure we have responses to our questions and our areas of interest. And I've just really enjoyed this year, the opportunity I've had to connect more directly with staff and acknowledge in this moment sort of the work that they do to make these meetings really impactful, and the information that we're all able to go back to our respective jurisdictions and share has really informed my approach on these issues. So thank you first off to staff for your support this year, and for the ongoing work that you're doing in a space that we all care deeply about. Other notes before we kick off, just wanted to call everybody's attention. The UN Climate Change Conference is currently taking place. It kicked off a few days ago and it wraps up, I think, in a day or two. But just want to encourage everybody to follow. I think if you Google like COP30, you'll be taken to their webpage that has a lot of great videos and studies and discussions on this topic. And as I thought about that and kind of reflected on my year, I just wanted to express my appreciation to the fellow electeds and jurisdictional staff, because I think what we've all seen is local action is going to be more important than ever at this moment and for the next few years, certainly. And local action can be some of the most impactful actions. So, this year being a part of this committee has re-energized me in that regard. And some of the actions, we've all experienced, I think reflect that our work in this space locally is more important than ever. And so thank you to all of you. And then finally, because we won't see each other again to the new year, just wanted to quickly say, happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays. I hope everybody is planning some downtime. And when we do regroup next year, Councilmember Cindy DeBala from Tacoma Park will be taking over as chair. And I don't believe Cindy's here today because I think she's on her way to the National League of Cities, but look forward to her stewardship in the year ahead. So those are my opening comments. Thank you for indulging me for a few minutes there. We will dive in to our agenda, which per usual always kicks off with adopting our summary from the last meeting, which was in September. Motions and seconds can be made verbally or in the chat box. The summary was previously circulated, so you've had a chance to review it. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? I'm scanning, but I always appreciate staff's helping identify hands or voices.
Hi, Randy Freed here. I so move.
All right. Thank you, Randy. Is there a second?
Second.
There we go.
Shannon
Thank
Moore
you, Shannon.
County.
I saw a second from Shannon Moore. Maybe there were others. All right. So we have a motion and a second. Any other substantive discussions, changes? Just scanning and not seeing any. So unless I hear or see any online no votes, we're going to assume that everybody here in attendance is approving. That's easier than waiting for all the yeses and the hands. So this is your moment to say no. And I'm not hearing or seeing any, so the motions are approved. We will move on to our next agenda item then. Today, we are lucky to be joined by some of our regional partners, Dr. Dale Mediaris from the Northern Virginia Regional Commission and Dr. Severin Bucher from the Border Step Institute in Germany. I hope I got that right. For more than 20 years now, our region has enjoyed a thriving professional and technical exchange with Germany. And Dr. Mediaris in particular has really enjoyed great success with the transfer of climate solutions from this work. They join us today to share and inspire us about the importance of these types of partnerships and examples of climate leadership in Germany. I'm so pleased that we're able to spend some time on this subject, and I will hand the microphone over to Dr. Midiaris,
Thank you
who
so
I'm
much. Just want to say special thanks also to Maya and Jeff for orchestrating this. My name is Del Medeiros. I'm a senior regional planner with the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. And we're proud of the context of today's discussion because it's not boutique. The importance of acting locally but drawing information, policy, and technical innovations from abroad has never been more imperative than ever before. And we're really, I feel very lucky to have the opportunity to introduce Severin, who I call a friend, not only because of his our close friendship over the years, but because of the record of performance that he's had in research, looking at sustainable energy and climate policies in a truly pioneering country like Germany. And then helping us explore ways in which some of these policy and technical innovations can be applied to our region. And we were very fortunate. Severin was very gracious, and his team at BorderStep, which is one of the premier energy and climate think tanks in Germany, hosted us along with colleagues from the German Federal Ministry of Energy and Economics and the the Berlin-based utility 50 Hertz for a full day discussion on ways in which the energy transformation taking place in Germany plays out, particularly in the context of data centers and how to make data centers as sustainable as possible. I will park into the chat box if I can find it, Severin's bio. I'll just highlight the fact that he is the co-founder and one of the chief directors of BorderStep, a think tank, an environmental and energy and climate think tank based in Berlin. And now I think easily recognized as the leading think tank, probably in Europe, and maybe even around the world, on the interface between sustainable data centers and climate and energy policy. And I just want to say, Severin, thank you so much for taking time from your very, very busy schedule. We see this not just as a slideshow, but as the beginning of a process in which you and your colleagues and your networks of expertise can be analyzed, studied, and applied to help us in this region. So thank you very much, Severin.
Well, thank you, Del. I really appreciate to be here today and give you a few insights in 10 or a little over 10 minutes, and then we might have time for discussion too. And I want to give the thanks back to Dale. It was a really great exchange a couple of weeks ago, and I will, try to wrap this up in a very few slides. I have 10 slides or so to show you. I would first like to start with a quick introduction into what's happening in Germany at the moment. You might heard about a lot about the energy transition, what we call the energy transition. If we can move on to the next slide, I can show you what that consists of. So we have three basic pillars that we are following. One is the increase of energy efficiency. That's often forgotten, but it's at the center of the transition, because the less energy you use, the less you have to replace by renewable sources. Second goal is to increase the renewable capacity in Germany, and I will show you how that goes along. And pillar 3 is what we call sector coupling, electrification, and green hydrogen. The idea behind that is to, wherever we can, move on to electric energy, for example, in the case of mobility, or heating in buildings by using heat pumps. And wherever that is not possible, we will try to replace natural gas, the still existing natural gas, by green hydrogen in the next decades, which is still the most ambitious goal, because green hydrogen is not available in huge amounts at the moment and is quite pricey too. So those are the three basic pillars. And if we just could move on to the next slide, please. You might have heard that we are phasing out two major energy sources. First, nuclear. Nuclear is not even on this slide because we actually phased it out a couple of years ago. We had until the year 2023 a small percentage of electricity that still came from the last 3 existing nuclear power plants in Germany. We had plenty more decades ago. That I know that you are following a slightly different approach in the US, but we agreed long ago to phase out nuclear. It's a long and difficult discussion, mostly fueled by the fact that we can't find good waste sites in Germany, and it's a very, very intense discussion that has been going on since the 70s in Germany. So we're out of nuclear energy. We also agreed to phase out of coal until the year 2037, which is a second problem because we used to have many coal-fired power plants that were slowly replaced by natural gas. But then with the war in Ukraine, that also became a huge difficulty. And so we eventually decided to go out of coal too until the year 2037, more or less, a little longer. So those are the baselines, so to speak, quite ambitious. And if we can move on to the next slide, please. At the same time, we're able to ramp up renewable production in the last years. We had this year, up to 55% on average in renewables in the electricity production. So we still have natural gas in the system, basically for heating. But when we talk about electricity, about 55% over the year comes from renewable sources. That is an average value. So there might be days in summer when we have up to 80–90% of renewable production in the grid already. It's quite comparable to what happens in California, as far as I know. And we have the goal to increase this until the year 2030 up to 80%. And then by 2045, we want to be carbon neutral. That's the goal so far. So this is happening along the other baselines that I told you. And if we could move on to the next slide. What I also want to show you is we are one of the countries, aside from all these developments that are happening, we are one of the countries with the fewest power outages in the world. Only I think Iceland and 1 or 2 other countries are ahead of us. And if you compare that to other countries, even countries that run basically on nuclear power plants like France and Spain, they are not much better than us. So this is quite an interesting fact because in the past, often the fact that using mainly renewable sources was associated with the risk of power outages. But that's not the case in our country, and it's also not the case because we're putting quite a lot of money into the grid infrastructure. And this is what I want to show you on the next 2 slides, because aside from the fact that we increased the share of renewables, we're investing quite a bit of money into the infrastructure. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So what is happening along the work that's being done in the transmission grid, so the big power lines connecting the north and the south of Germany, we have basically wind production in the north along the coast. We have a lot of PV in the south, Bavaria, that area, and we're trying to link these regions to profit from both sources, so to speak. So we have wind along the coast, sun in the south. But what happens along these bigger projects on the transmission lines are a lot of projects in the regions of Germany. And that's quite interesting because we have, aside from the TSOs and DSOs, so distribution and transmission grid operators, we have smaller energy service companies that are starting to build their own microgrids and what we call collector grids. Collector grids are in between a microgrid. So a microgrid would typically serve a neighborhood, and a collector grid is somewhat bigger, and it connects renewable sources, for example, to battery storage. In the future, we'll also connect this to electrolyzers that will produce green hydrogen. And a lot of these smaller projects are happening overall in the country. And that's quite interesting because they are creating a new stability in the grid. So stability is not only coming from the big transmission lines, it's also happening in the regions by replacing individual power sources by multiple smaller power sources like solar, wind, and electrolyzers. And if we could just move on one slide further, that's one of these examples. It's a project happening a bit north of Berlin. We're situated in Berlin, and it's about 100 kilometers from here. It's a rural region where we have quite a few wind parks, so a lot of wind turbines. We have some photovoltaic plants, and now operators are installing larger battery capacities to store the renewable energy for times when we do not have enough wind, or when solar power is scarce. And yeah, as I said earlier, this is quite an interesting approach, but because it is offering what I mentioned earlier, so-called sector coupling. So we're more and more able to store energy from renewable sources in batteries, and in the future that will also be backed up by green hydrogen, and by that becoming region-wise more energy independent. And whatever is cannot be supplied by these micro or collector grids will then come from the transmission grid from the bigger power lines. And I just want to give you one example of another field we're working in. So Dale mentioned earlier that we have a specialization in data centers. As in your country, we have quite a few data center projects at the moment. Just one announced a couple of days ago that will be in the gigawatt scale. So this is one of the big energy consumers of the future, and we're trying to integrate these data centers into these new grid infrastructures. And if we just could move on one slide further, and you will see that the projected power demand of the data centers in the next years, this is steeply increasing. At the moment, around 4% of the total electricity consumption in Germany can be attributed to data centers, but this is expected to rise up to 8 to 9% in the next decade. And so we're looking for solutions to integrate these infrastructures, not only due to their power consumption, though they obviously consume a lot of electricity, and they also produce quite a bit of waste heat. And this is the interesting point, because the waste heat can in Germany be for heating purposes. We live in a cold, moderate climate, and we still have a lot of district heating systems. And so we're trying to build the data centers in regions where they can be easily connected to existing grids to supply households with heat in the winter. There's also there's a little disadvantage, as you might know. I mean, they produce a lot of heat in the summer, usually produce a lot of heat in the summer because they also need a lot of cooling. But we're also trying to come up with solutions for that. We're looking to some of the Scandinavian countries like Denmark and Sweden that are building long-term thermal storage in quite efficient ways, and that might be a solution to cover also this gap. If we could just move on one slide more, so come to the end. So one of the fields we're working in at the moment is to find good and sustainable solutions for grid integration and heat reuse of these data centers, as I mentioned earlier. it's a bit challenging because often the data center sites where in the past were found outside the bigger agglomerations, also due to the high prices of property. But we're developing a new angle on that in the last year or last 2 years due to the heat. And that might in the future have a major influence on settlement strategies for data centers. So we might see data centers moving a little closer to urban agglomerations again because of the heat and the heat we use. And yeah, that was my short glimpse into what's happening in Germany. I hope it wasn't too long, and I'm still here for questions.
No, thank you for the presentation. And I want to hand it back to Dale briefly and see if you want to provide any other sort of context about the information or the working relationship with NVRC and Severin.
Yeah, just want to say again, thanks so much, Severin, and thanks, Maya, and Jeff for allowing us this opportunity to share Severin's work and just give us some more insight into some really profound policy and technical innovations that are taking place from which we can learn and possibly adopt. When we were in Germany with some of the energy managers from our localities, see Michelle is online, but Mark Aveni from Loudoun was with us as well. Greg Farley from George Mason University, and Mark and John Morrow from Fairfax County. What we were realizing was pretty much the obvious. Well, first of all, Germany is the second largest concentration or market of data centers in the world, but these profound economic synergies as well. Equinix had 15, 16 data centers in Frankfurt. They have an equivalent number in our region. These are relations, these are attributes that can be utilized. If Equinix is conveying waste heat into a district energy system, applying green walls to promote, more forms of energy sustainability, why can't we encourage or cultivate relationships through these commercial partners to transport and apply these innovations into our own backyard? NVRC also 3 years ago identified that Germany is the second largest investor in our region within the boundaries of our local governments. And there's also this profound connection through applied research. We can partner with the likes of George Mason University, Virginia Tech, and have them contact Severin, his research network, to facilitate this flow of information. So I just wanted to stop there and again say thanks to everybody for listening, in particular to Severin for being so willing to take time from your really, really busy schedule to work with us. I'll repeat what I said earlier to stress that this is not just a one-off conversation. This is part of a long-term dynamic that we have cultivated over 25 years. We see it going for another 25, where we learn, we study, and we apply these sustainability practices to our own region. And we have every intention of not only sustaining it, but making it stronger because it's so important and so vital. Just wanted to turn to Michelle, see if she had anything to add.
No, thank you. Thank you guys so much for providing the summary, and hopefully we can bring a lot of what we learned in Germany back to Northern Virginia. It should be very exciting in the next couple of years to hopefully see that happen. Thanks.
Great. We prepared a study report or a final report on the study tour that we did as guests of the German Ministry of Economics, included the workshop with Severin. That'll be done Friday. I'll make sure that Jeff and Maya get a copy of it that they can send to the entire committee. Otherwise, I'll just mute myself and invite everyone else that has questions to take advantage of Severin's expertise and knowledge.
Thank you both for being here. I am going to open it up the floor to anybody who has questions, but I'm going to use the chair prerogative for a second to ask one that I had, which was I'm curious about how Germany handled reskilling people from those fields. You talk about the coal industry. I know here in the States that's a part of this process, right? So I'm curious if less on the energy efficiency side and more on the human, capital piece. If you could just speak to ways that Germany addressed sort of reskilling people out of those industries.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Very good question. It's one of the most pressing issues, particularly in Eastern Germany, where we still have a lot of coal industry, or used to have a lot of coal industry. And there are programs that run for, I think, for the next 15 to 20 years to reskill people and find them new jobs, and either by slowly phasing out the older jobs and do that in a socially responsible way. So, but also to reskill younger people into the new trades, like for example, servicing wind turbines, servicing these new grid infrastructures, and similar things. Yeah. But it's a very pressing issue. Yeah.
If I could just add to that, it's a good question because in 2023, we took the career technical education directors, in particular from Alexandria City Schools, to look at the German vocational training program for ways in which, for instance, the dual system of apprenticeships is legion. Even the current administration appreciates what the apprenticeship system there means in terms of its application here in the United States. And the approach that we're taking is that we mapped about 130, 140 Swiss, German, and Austrian firms with a presence in our region, the likes of SAP or Rehal, which does geothermal heating cooling systems, which actually did the geothermal heating cooling systems for a number of Alexandria, Arlington, Loudoun schools. There's your living laboratory. Tie the presence of these firms with very well established, very mature, very pioneering apprenticeship programs where there are paid apprenticeships, harmonized accreditation beginning at around the ages of 14, 15, and then tied into the curricula of our schools. And it can extend into other arenas as well that are not maybe as directly connected to energy or electric vehicles, for instance, in the case of Arlington schools, sending their students from their auto tech programs to Mercedes-Benz or BMW dealerships to learn how to fix EVs. It could extend into the presence of Lidl, or again SAP in data centers, or VW. But we have a program that is growing as we speak exactly on this topic. How do we destigmatize vocational training, but elevate apprenticeships, particularly in the sustainable technology sector, and specifically as it relates to data centers?
That's great.
I'll also add really quickly that we toured an Equinix data center in Frankfurt who had an on-site training and career development, or a career transitioning program for people outside of the IT industry to be trained and skilled to work at data centers. So it's also important to encourage those kind of on-site company provided trainings.
That's a great point. I see Randy has his hand up.
I do. Thanks. Thank you, sir, for sharing your experience. It's great to hear some of the lessons that we can learn. Along those lines, you mentioned data center load growth as a real challenge. That's a huge challenge for parts of the AMCOG region here. I'm wondering, has Germany experimented with an approach called bring your own power, or bring your own new clean energy, Beyonce?
Yeah.
And also, have you experimented, excuse me, with any demand response approaches for data centers? Because obviously, if you're sizing the grid for peaks, and if you can ramp down on one of the key users during those peaks, it makes the whole thing more efficient. But when we brought that up here, there's been a lot of resistance to the idea because the data centers want to be able to keep operating no matter what. So any experience you might share on bring your own power or demand response I'd be very interested to hear. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Randy, for the questions. Yeah, first question, bring your own power. We're seeing this happening at the moment. It was unthinkable until today, but we have also first projects in the north that are trying to do that. We have one planned on an island in northern Germany where a company is planning to build an AI data center, so a little bit out of the urban areas. But they are thinking about bringing their own power because of scarcity of power in that region, and that might be a combination of wind, solar, and then hydrogen. That is in the planning phase. Demand response also a huge issue. And same answer here from the data center. So if you ask them, of course they want a continuous power supply, low costs. But then if you get into discussions with them, they actually have quite a few flexibilities. It's air conditioning, battery storage. And it's often a question of doing the right planning at the right time. So if you plan the battery slightly bigger than it needs to be for the sheer data center, you can also use it as a demand response or flexibility in the grid later on, and that is a question of the right pricing, of course. I mean, flexibility has to get a price tag. It does not have it at the moment, but there's also a lot of discussion going on this. So making flexibility demand response a service in the grid and also valuing that service with a price. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I just saw a few other cameras come on. Does anybody else want to unmute and ask a question? I see Jeff's hand is up.
Yes, thanks. Severin, you mentioned collector grids. Here in the United States, we obviously, we have system operators, so we have the transmission level grid operator, we're in the PJM, and then within the PJM, we have companies like Dominion that have like complete control of the distribution all the way to the meter, and we have the concept of, behind the meter power.
Yeah.
How is probably a conversation that we don't have time for the full, to really get into it, but just briefly, like how does that work from the regulatory standpoint? Are they certified to kind of have these sub distribution company grid operators? Like, what does that look like in Germany?
Yeah, also very, very good question, Jeff. It's in the making, I would say. So usually the roles were clearly defined. So we had TSOs and DSOs, and the TSOs they are quite happy with that development of the collector grids because they can, because for them it's far easier to deal with a supplier that has his own collector grid that can contribute a significant amount of power and a significant amount of storage capacity to the transmission grids. I think the DSOs, the smaller companies, they are not so happy with that development. They see that as a competitor in the longer run. But it's in the process of discussion again. So it's a new role, and it's legal what they do. So it's bound to the regulation and the law. But I think it's going to influence the market in the longer run, and that's the biggest concern at the moment. Yeah. But a very good question, yeah, and we would need way more time to discuss
Thank you.
all the issues around that. Yeah.
You're muted.
Sorry, I had muted myself. I was just pointing out that they dropped in the chat the Career Technical Education Study Tour information, as well as the data center and the foreign direct investment maps. So just want to encourage people to visit the chat and hit those links and take some time to look at them later. I'm scanning real quick. Please feel free to unmute. Not seeing other hands or hearing other voices. I want to go ahead and thank the both of you for your collaboration, for your work, for coming here to speak. It is really great to know we're sort of in this, internationally together, and that collaboration is existing. And I'll share. Alexandria is a city of only 15 square miles, so there's nowhere to put a data center that isn't near other people. And so it's interesting to hear the ways you could pull positives, something positive from that potentially in terms of excess heat and energy opportunities. So thank you for touching on that and providing that insight. With that, we're going to say thank you and move on to our next item. Appreciate y'all very much. On the agenda next is more sort of inspiration today on great work that's happening from other climate partners here in the Mid-Atlantic. Today, we've invited members of the Mid-Atlantic Sustainability Collaborative, which was founded by COG and EPA Region 3 many years ago in 2010, to serve as a forum for sharing best experiences, practices on sustainability, climate mitigation, and resilience. The group has evolved over the years and was recently transitioned from EPA to COG to keep that network going. The group is joined by members from ICLEI and the World Resource Institute, who have agreed to help facilitate the work of the network. I'd like to welcome some of the key members of the group to kick us off. Ms. Davis from COG, will you get the ball rolling?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so this sustainability collaborative for the Mid-Atlantic, it was really a lot of major cities, regions, and states that were involved, and we would meet quarterly and in person once a year. We really spent a lot of time learning from each other and with each other and collaborating on projects and data analyses. And we also have done grant work over the years with members of this collaborative to support our local governments in the DC region. And the last few years, this group has really been focused on CPRG and coordinating with EPA on that climate pollution reduction program. And one of the major pieces of deliverables is the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, or the CCAP. And all of these state and regional CCAPs, they are due in about a week and a half on December 1st. So we're all working towards wrapping up these comprehensive climate action plans. And so this is a good time for us to kind of share all this work and progress being made in this space across the Mid-Atlantic with you all, as well as transitioning into a climate focus group and transitioning into the leadership and coordination of ICLEI and the World Resources Institute. So we really appreciate Jess Granis and Sarah Burke and Lacey Shaver being with us here today. And yeah, Jess is going to facilitate this conversation with some of the members of this group that have been working on CPRG today. And she actually, some of you all may remember her, she actually has a long history with us. She was leading resilience initiatives at the Georgetown Climate Center 10, 15 years ago. And she worked really closely, was a leading expert and author, and really helped work with, local, state, utilities, regional agencies in this region on identifying first sets of resilience initiatives, first, climate risk assessment assessments, and then identifying strategies that we could collaborate on. So I'm very happy to welcome Jess back, and with that, I'll pass it over to you, Jess.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Maya, and it's lovely to be back with the Mid-Atlantic. Thanks for having us. We're so excited to be part of this conversation. I'm Jess Granis. I'm the Director of Programs at ICLEI USA. For some of you who may not be familiar with us, ICLEI USA is the largest and oldest network in the US supporting local climate action. We help cities, counties, regional governments, and tribes advance their zero emission goals and build sustainable, resilient communities. We support members through online tools, knowledge sharing, convenings, member-driven projects, and peer learning opportunities like this. So we're so delighted to be part of this network. And as the Vice Mayor said so eloquently at the top, the action is at the local level. You guys are doing the important work on the ground that's making the lives better for your residents. And so we were very excited to be able to bring your stories to the domestic and international stages. We recently brought a delegation of over 30 local leaders to the climate conference of the parties in Brazil. And I, along with some of my ICLEI colleagues, will be at the National League of Cities Summit in Salt Lake City. So if any of you will be there, please come and engage with us. And I'm happy to facilitate this conversation today, but I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Sarah Burke, who's a senior program officer on our zero emissions team at ICLEI USA. She's going to share some lessons from beyond the region. We've been supporting several regions around the country in conducting their comprehensive climate action plans. So she's going to talk to you about some of those lessons from beyond the Mid-Atlantic, and then we're going to turn it back here to learn from you all. Sarah?
Thank you, Jess. Yeah, so next slide. We can go to the next slide. As it's already been kind of discussed, I just wanted to give just a brief overview of what the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant was, for those of you who were not aware of it. So it was administered by the EPA, authorized under the Inflation Reduction Act, and it was a grant to help develop and also implement ambitious plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other harmful air pollution. All the implementation grants have already been distributed and are in progress. And so really we're going to be talking about the planning grants that were mentioned that the comprehensive is due within the next couple of weeks. So I know a lot of our partners are busy finalizing those documents. And so at ICLEI USA, one of our roles that we did is we actually did provide support either directly through some of our fee-for-service to help some of these plans or through our membership advising. So next slide. So this shows the map of the assistance that we provided for our CPRG work. So in total, there were 79 MSAs that received funding, and 22 of those, ICLEI USA had some part in supporting their plans, either directly or indirectly. 8 of those were direct, so we were in the weeds with those partners on doing their inventories, forecasting, their emission reductions, and assisting with writing reports. One key example that was kind of different from some of our other work that we were doing on these CPRG works is one of our partners down in Florida wanted to do a grant funding matrix in relation to all of their reduction actions. So, you know, with the limited federal funding that is out there now, what was available to actually help fund all of these actions that they were wanting to do to reduce their emissions? And so we looked on a local, regional, and state level, as well as what still might actually have been out there on the federal, to provide them a pretty decent matrix that they could use moving forward on how they could fund these projects that they wanted to do. In addition, we had 14 of the CPRG projects that we provided indirect support. So that either was technical assistance through membership with ICLEI USA, where they would reach out to us to provide them assistance, or just access into our ClearPath platform, which I'll mention what ClearPath is in just a second. It should be noted, not shown on this map, is there was over 114 tribal nations that also received funding. And of those, 8 of them specified that they were using our ClearPath platform to actually do their projects and finalize their reports. So it was happening across the nation. As you can see, we were basically helping everyone in every single time zone. And there was a lot of common efforts happening, but also very different. Different CPRGs wanted to be more aggressive, others wanted to be less aggressive. And so it was tailoring for each one of those areas to make sure that we were meeting what the CPRG request was. Next slide. So as I mentioned, ClearPath 2.0 was the platform that we used to help do all the modeling and forecasting for our fee-for-service projects. Also, some of our indirect support also use this platform. Most of you are probably aware of what it is, but if not, earlier this year we launched ClearPath 2.0, which is a powerful platform that streamlines the entire climate action process through smarter data, dynamic emissions modeling, and collaboration that help local governments turn climate plans into measurable actions. This takes a different approach to modeling, and one that allows us to incorporate dynamic changes that occur at the ground level in real time. So it's a very dynamic platform. And so we were able to, with some of our projects, to work hand in hand with our local governments to determine what they wanted to see as their reductions, as well as having a very nice dashboard that we could share and report out what those were that are being included into their reports. Next slide. And so, you know, it's what are we doing moving forward? You know, there's some thoughts of, you know, now that all these CPRG plans are going to be out and available for viewing, what's the next steps? So one thing that we are doing at ClearUSA is we will be working to gather all of the completed PCAPs, which are the priority climate action plans that were developed about a year and a half ago, and the comprehensive plans, and putting it into our repository, which is known as the Atlas of Sustainability Action Plans. It's on our website. Right now, currently, what this platform is we have over 1,000 plans from roughly about 700 jurisdictions, ranging everything from climate action and inventories to resilience plans. So having one central location that someone can go to see what kind of plans are established for your area, your region. This is open to local governments as well as residents. Residents can go on to this website to see what is available. So we're going to be working to try to gather all of these plans to house them on this map to provide a central location for everyone to access. And then the other thing I'm going to talk about just briefly is our municipal investment fund. So in partnership with the Coalition for Green Capital, we, along with them, are offering market building funding and technical support to help communities develop public-private partnerships to help accelerate clean energy projects, kind of focus on buildings, transportation, and some others. So our first round of funding has gone out to those individuals. But part of that is we are developing technical assistance for our grant recipients to either around policy development and, you know, additional funding sources that might be available. Currently, that technical assistance will only be available to our grant recipients, but we are going to make it eventually available to all of our ICLEI USA members in the near future. So it'll be another resource that's available, particularly with the decrease in federal funding currently, to find other avenues to provide assistance on developing projects and also ways to potentially fund future projects. So those materials will be available in the near future. So, you know, we will definitely make sure our membership is aware that we have new technical assistance. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jess. You can go to the next slide to actually open up to our discussion with some of our CPRG recipients to have a dialogue on the process.
Thanks, Sarah. So yes, we'd love to learn from you about how your CPRG funded climate action planning process has helped you advance regional scale solutions, what your highest priority actions are that you're going to be moving forward in the coming years, and what lessons and partnerships and new ideas have you developed through your climate action planning process. So I'm going to call on some folks and then we'll open up to the group for folks to share their stories. So Maya, will you first share your lessons from the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments?
Thank you, Jess. Yeah, sure. So this committee back in 2020 adopted a 2030 Climate Energy Action Plan. And this comprehensive climate action plan for the broader MSA, it doesn't replace that, but it definitely let us help advance and update our greenhouse gas projections and measuring modeling. For the first time ever, we were able to do a quantitative air quality benefits analysis for our climate change measures, which has been something of interest to our air quality stakeholders for a number of years now. And also do a workforce development assessment that was part of this project. And so that helped us identify needs like potential shortages in workforce for workers who can install and operate and fix electric vehicle charging stations and electric vehicles. And so, for instance, one of the things that's coming after the that's been coming as we close out the CEEPC process is helping to support the Greater Washington Clean Cities Coalition job fairs to support workforce development in this space. A lot of the measures in the CEEPC, they do align with our 2030 plan. So, buildings, transportation, right, obviously are focus areas. But, I think, it did prioritize cleaning the grid, advancing building decarbonization, and showing how EVs had a big impact on the transportation sector. So those are definitely focus areas continuing to move forward. But something new in this plan that we stakeholders from across sectors, across committees, and different sorts of interest groups were pushing for and advocating for was added measures on data centers and engagement. So through this process, we did work with a local government sort of ad hoc data center working group to help develop this this data center measure. And it's really it's been really an educational process and educational information and laying out the foundation of what's possible. And we are planning on continuing this local government data center working group to really continue to build capacity and consensus amongst the local governments in this space, as well as look at legislative priorities and other issues, what community benefits, what opportunities or should local governments be looking at that are looking to host data centers. So that's a major outcome of this work. We also developed a lot of relationships with community organizations that support and represent our underserved communities and environmental justice communities. And so we would like to see those relationships continue to help support engagement and action in our most vulnerable communities. And then lastly, we are another outcome that's related to the development of the CCAP is working with Electrified DC. Some of you may know them as our Electrified DMV, to start to lay the groundwork for a regional electrification hub to help move these initiatives forward. So those are some of the things that have come out of this project for us and that this group, CEEPC, will see moving forward. So thank you.
That's great, Maya. Lots of lessons from DC to Germany on data hubs. I was hoping to get some lessons from Virginia. Tom Ballou, would you be willing to come off mute and share some of your lessons from Virginia?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Sorry I can't be on camera, but my camera doesn't work, so got to deal with my voice. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Ballou. I'm the Air Quality Planning Manager at DEQ, and we, DEQ, were the lead on the CPRG program and grants from EPA. It's been a very interesting experience, as you might think.
First, I would say is, and many Virginia folks may know this and others as well, but the comprehensive long-term plan that we're currently developing is really the first climate plan that's ever been put together in Virginia. So that in itself is an accomplishment that um, I think will help us going forward. Though I will say that the plan that we have right now is really an aspirational plan. It doesn't have mandates or it doesn't have anything that's binding, but it does provide two pathways to get to future GHG reductions if one of those paths are chosen. It also included, well, we spent a lot of time looking at business as usual scenarios. That is, what's going on if no other further actions were taken. That was important to Virginia, as you probably can suspect. You already have talked a bit about data centers. We had to deal with the issue of electricity demand growth in our analyses. The other thing we had to deal with was the current uncertainties of some state and federal programs that are out there and whether they will be available or not. One of the scenarios two scenarios we did as part of the plan does show what would it take to reach a net zero carbon goal by 2045 in Virginia, which is, some of you may know, is a goal in the Virginia energy policy. It's not a mandate, but it is a goal. The other scenario looks at a more moderate emission reductions trajectory, but still is significant. So, in terms of high priority actions that have come out of this whole exercise, our plan identifies 14 separate actions, and they run across all the major economic and emissions sectors. It also talks about how they could both be implemented and funded. The other thing I would say is right now we're kind of in I would call a holding pattern, because as you all know, we have a new administration soon coming in, and we're kind of waiting to see what direction we might go in terms of either updating or revising this plan further. The other thing I would say is there was also a mention of the implementation grants earlier. Virginia was very fortunate to receive 2 implementation grants from EPA for about $200 million. So we are currently very hard at work implementing those projects that would fall under those 2 grants. That includes everything from methane reductions from coal mines and landfills, food rescue and composting programs, and natural and working lands preservation and sequestration enhancement. So that's also keeping us quite busy at the moment. In terms of lessons and partnerships, new ideas, again, being the first real comprehensive climate plan for Virginia, the whole process has been a learning experience for us. I have relied on a very small but mighty DEQ CPRG team. Many of them are on this call today. I could not have done all of this without them. We could not have done it without also the help of our contractor, ICF, which we shared with a number of other areas that are talking with you all today. Obviously, we had to work with the MSAs that also got CPRG planning grants, and I think that has kind of continued and expanded our partnerships with those groups. We have a long history of working with COG in terms of Clean Air Act related air quality plans. And this has just kind of expanded our cooperation into the climate arena as well. Same thing with Richmond and Hampton Roads, who you will hear from later during this call. The last thing I would say is this is also the process allowed us to explore a number of new ways and methods to do public outreach and get public input. Everything from surveys to meetings to tabling events to even our first ever digital outreach campaign. So we've tried a lot of new ways to get public input into the plan. And we've been fairly successful in that regard as well. We've really kind of reached out to more than or gotten contact and info from over 1,000 people through all those efforts. So it's it's been a learning experience and a good one for the most part, in a lot of different areas. That's, I think, all I have.
That's great. Thanks, Tom, for those lessons from your process. I'd love to pull Whitney in from Hampton Roads to talk about their work here. Whitney, are you on?
Yes, I'm on. Thanks. So honestly, I'm going to echo a lot of the things that Tom said. Biggest one for us, so we're a region of about 20 localities, and we had no intention of doing climate work. We've been doing flooding and resilience. So this grant really put this on our work plan, and so it really, gave us a chance to do so much more in the space than we had planned to do. Same with engagement. We heard from some groups that we don't normally work with. Sierra Club was really a great stakeholder at bringing attention to some different things. I think in terms of our highest priorities, what we ended up doing is collecting information examples from localities, and we just didn't have an awareness of the things that were already going on. Our localities don't have climate action plans, so it was really digging in to find those examples, and it's a great opportunity to share them. The other thing, I think what we'll see in the future is we focused on things we were already interested in doing, and this is a great chance to do multiple benefits and to tell that story differently. So, the trails are a high priority for us. Really, people weren't talking about trails as a way to reduce vehicle miles traveled. There's an initiative to do more transit. We heard from so many public events that was a higher priority than perhaps we realized. And then, we do a lot of sort of wetlands and forest buffer things for water quality, and really hadn't had as much conversation about carbon sequestration. So this is a chance for us to put those stories together. Um, we'll see how that goes. And then in terms of lessons learned, a lot of this is new for us. I think, again, it's sort of pockets of realizing that we had a couple communities that were doing fleet conversions that we didn't know about, energy, municipal building, energy efficiency initiatives. So our hope is just to bring those people and those stories together so that people can get those lessons learned and those sort of colleague stories quicker, and then progress will move faster, and it will be cheaper and easier than what they've been doing the last couple of years. So that was our benefits, and again, it's been a great opportunity that we just we didn't see happening without this grant. So thanks.
That's great. So exciting to hear so much focus on nature-based solutions as well. And now moving into Maryland, I'd love to hear some lessons from Baltimore. Anna Marshall, are you on to share some of your lessons from CPRG?
Yes. Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me. I'm Anna Marshall from Baltimore Metropolitan Council, a senior environmental planner, and the Baltimore MSA CPRG project manager. And so in terms of the CPRG climate action planning, regional scale solutions, it really helps to bring together jurisdictional staff and stakeholders throughout the region who might not have otherwise worked together. So that was a nice thing to work with everybody. And it also allowed jurisdictions to prioritize the greenhouse gas emission reduction actions and then understand how their actions at the local level come together and help at the regional level. And some of our highest priority actions in the CAP that we're moving forward. So transportation is the biggest emitter in the Baltimore region, and there's 7 measures for that specific sector. And electrification of cars and buses, and as well as just looking at renewable energy sources is a big thing that we're going to be moving forward with. And then also increasing ways people can get around without a car, and increasing active transportation were big actions. And then also preserving green space and incorporating nature-based solutions and more trees and overall a better environment in both the built environment and the natural environment in our region was an important priority as well. And some new ideas on the horizon that were developed. So jurisdiction staff, they highlighted the need to increase climate literacy and knowledge among other departments within their jurisdictions. And so we're actually about to launch a project that came out of the CEEPC development, and it will provide climate e-learning courses for jurisdictional staff and teach staff how to incorporate climate change considerations into their everyday work. So that's we're currently in the selection process for a consultant, and that should be moving forward soon. So we're excited about that.
That's great. Sounds like lots of work to bring a whole of government approach to this effort and build those public-private partnerships that are so important. I'd love to hear from the Maryland Department of Environment on their work. Josie or Chris, are you on and able to share some of your efforts?
We're on. I think Chris is going to give some remarks.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. With respect to the CPRG, we've got two exciting things moving forward. One of them is well, first of all, MDE submitted our CCAP to EPA in late June, and we've been following and supporting and quite impressed by the work of the MSAs to develop their MSA CCAPs. But yeah, we submitted ours in June as originally planned, and haven't heard much since from the recipient of that. But we do have some exciting things going on with respect to our implementation grants. We're moving forward on the Atlantic Conservation Coalition grant, which is led by North Carolina with Maryland, Virginia, and South Carolina as partner agencies. In addition to some NGOs, particularly the Nature Conservancy. The aim of the ACC grant through the CPRG implementation is to protect and restore vital coastal habitats, peatlands, and forests across the U.S. So Maryland is recently went down to North Carolina for a kickoff meeting, and a discussion occurred where we selected projects and began to move those projects forward to increase the natural working lands of various states, particularly Carolina, Maryland, Virginia, and South Carolina. We also we just now through that process submitted a request for proposal through the Maryland Department of Agriculture through our Healthy Soils competition for agroforestry practices that will be funded by that ACC grant. In addition to the NWL focused CPRG implementation grant, we have the Clean Corridors Coalition, which is moving forward. It's led by New Jersey with Maryland, Delaware, and Connecticut as partners. The Clean Corridor Coalition it's a multi-state effort to deploy more medium and heavy duty zero emission charging infrastructure, mostly focused on providing the infrastructure for freight movement along the I-95 corridor and adjacent roads from Connecticut all the way down to Maryland. So we've submitted our request for information that closed on September 30th, and we're rolling out comms on how to implement those projects. And in addition, we have some local support programs that aren't covered by the MSA CPRG planning grant, which provides technical assistance similar to on these issues through our University of Maryland Environmental Finance Center. So that's mostly an update on Maryland on their CPRG engagement. I also have some remarks focused on some of the other areas we're working on, like home electrification or NWL, if that's necessary later in this talk. But I'm happy to answer any questions. And actually, Josie can probably answer the questions better than I can.
Thanks. That's some impressive stuff. Was the Clean Corridors Coalition and the Healthy Soils Initiative supported through your CPRG grant, or were those separate grant proposals that came out of your planning process?
We were awarded those implementation grants as
Okay,
partners.
that's great. And then I was hoping to pull some folks in from either DC or Delaware. Valerie Gray or Jen Hatch, any lessons that you want to share about CPRG work in your areas?
Hi, this is Brittany in DC. Jen had to hop off.
Okay.
But we've had climate action plans in the past, and this CPRG experience has really let us dig deeper into understanding some of the more short to medium term items, particularly on like energy efficiency and household electrification. And we've done some specific focused outreach with residents about transitioning off gas. I think Tom was talking a little bit about the engagement that they've done. So we got to do, focus groups, surveys, and really exercise some of that, our engagement muscles there. And then also wanted to echo the note that Maya gave about, this experience has really given us like different tools to lean into the multiple benefits that, exist on, just for a little small scale in DC, like looking at places in the city where there are the co-benefits of, climate actions, particularly on the air quality piece. So that was an exciting new endeavor for us, and is kind of a complement to some of the other work we're doing. And I'll also add that, we've been doing our inventory for many years, but we took, this opportunity to sort of look more expansively at our inventory and do a deeper dive. And we've also done, we're working right now on our first like consumption-based emissions inventory, which was really exciting. And then final point I'll add in terms of like partnerships is we've had an internal task force to really bring together all of our sister agencies to get engaged on this work, and move forward like our carbon neutrality goals, specifically at the government operations level. So yeah, we're excited to turn everything in on next week.
That's great. Thanks for sharing from DC. Valerie or anybody from Delaware want to share before we open it up for questions and discussion? All right. Any questions that anyone has for others in the group about their CPRG work?
And if staff could maybe take down the slide, it'll just make it easier for us to see each other and see any hands or faces. Sorry, I just saw a hand go up and down. Josie, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. So we, as Chris mentioned, we turned our CCAP in late June, and our Governor Moore, last year put out an executive order that every agency needs to make a climate implementation plan. So the Department of the Environment, our secretary chairs that governor's sub-cabinet that was created from that executive order. So we worked with all 25 of our agencies to make an agency-specific climate implementation plan. And so that was pretty exciting to get those developed last year. And this year, we have to turn in an annual report about what kind of progress we made on that. And so although we already turned in our CCAP and we don't have to turn that on December 1st, we do have to turn this report in on December 1st. So if you want to see what Maryland's up to, I mean, we've got a ton going on, and it's been great working with all of our peer agencies, and then the combination of that plus all of the stakeholders involved with the MSAs. I mean, that's just been collaboration and conversations that really are unprecedented. I mean, everybody talking to each other as much and in this sort of very meaningful way at the same time. So we've been able to get a lot done, and we've got a lot going on. So I'd be happy to send a link out as soon as it gets published. We have to turn it in by December 1st, and the governor's office usually has us publish that shortly after. But it's a good report. It's pretty concise, and it tells a good story. And in terms of actions, we've done a lot of work on buildings this year. Anyways, I'll stop there. But I would say if you really want to see what Maryland's up to, we have a really nice report coming out the December first week of December.
That's great. I appreciate that additional color from Maryland. Thanks, Josie. Several folks mentioned sort of the uncertainty around funding to implement these plans. I'm curious to hear if anyone is developing innovative strategies to support implementation. Are you looking at different funding and financing strategies to move your plans forward into implementation? Any strategies that folks would like to share?
I saw Sarah's. I know Alani had a hand up, but I also just saw Sarah Kogels. I can't quite see everybody's name. Come up. So either Sarah or Noelani, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, mine is very quick because it's a building on that question. We're just really starting to explore more private and foundation funding, given the current fiscal realities, and so I'd be really interested in anyone else's experience with that as part of the implementation plan here.
So I think, funding and financing is a challenge right now, right? So, there's interest in kind of continuing. We had several focus or work group meetings with local governments working on climate and energy engagement and outreach during this project, as well as focus group and one-on-one calls and meetings with these community organizations that I mentioned. And I think there's a lot of interest in bringing those groups together more and doing enhancing our work around climate engagement, particularly to support underserved communities. But we're sort of looking at how are we going to fund such initiatives? And in the past, during the previous Trump administration, we did have a robust list of private and foundation funding and all these other funding organizations that could be targeted. And so definitely post getting this CEEPC adopted and wrapping up some of these other related projects, there's definitely interest in and we did start to kind of relook at that list and see if we can update it. So I think that's something that we could kind of do in collaboration with our local governments, because we only have so much capacity to manage so many grants. But if it could help our local government members to move forward on their actions as well, then that's something that we could look at doing.
That's great. Anybody
I will add something to that, Jess. With some of the work that we were doing with some of our other projects, one of the things that we had recommended, particularly with that Florida project, was to look at the appropriations each year to see that they may already be funding something through appropriations to seek additional funding, and so to ask that, make that request at the state level. So it's a different way of looking at, instead of applying, it's more of a an ask for additional appropriations to a program you may already have existing that could be expanded to include additional.
Any other lessons to share on funding or financing implementation, or questions for your colleagues in other parts of the region?
Hi, this is Jeff. Just wanted to take a second here and recognize that I think both Allison Riley and Mark are on the line. Allison or Mark, did you want to chime in at all about the Mid-Atlantic work you guys have been shepherding all these years and where you see some of this going?
Hey, Jeff. Yeah, I mean, Mark and I are here together. Um, was there a specific kind of area of interest? I mean, we were talking funding, and unfortunately, we don't have any additional funding available for this work right now, and I wouldn't anticipate anything else coming that's IRA-like in the near future. I mean, I do want to, say thank you to all those who've been working on the CPRG program for the past few years. It has been an incredibly heavy lift. Everyone's done amazing work to get the PCAPs out and now the CCAPs. And what we've seen coming out so far has been really extraordinary. So we're very excited to see the rest of the plans and sort of start dissecting those to see what you guys came up with.
Yeah, and
yes.
CPRG and funding aside, Jeff, you mentioned earlier that you looked back and saw that this group was formed back in 2009, 2010, and that was with some former colleagues of mine and Allison's that you had been working with at that time. And it's great to see that these communications are still happening. We've been sort of in this period of flux of EPA's involvement being a bit more intensive, or pulling back a little bit and then bringing things back again. And then now, so glad to see, Jeff, that you at COG are sort of leading the charge here of bringing all these really important players together in our region to have these important conversations. So from my end, I'm just happy to see that these conversations are still happening and ongoing, and we're excited to be involved as much as we possibly can be.
Well, we are at time, so I wanted to thank everyone. Thank you, EPA, for supporting this work, and to all the folks in the region who shared their experiences from the CPRG. I'm turning it back to you.
No, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you to everyone who shared. I want to take a moment and just shout out sort of my hometown of hometowns of Hampton Roads. I'm so glad that they were part of this conversation. And when 20 jurisdictions was mentioned, I quickly jotted down, I think I lived in 7 of them. And truthfully, in my first 25 years, and one of the dominant reasons why I relocated to the DC area at that point was transportation and transit, and I just wanted to get out of my car. And so I'm so thrilled to hear that Hampton Roads is part of this dialogue and looking at transportation and trails as part of the solutions. I ran my high school 5Ks on Mount Trashmore, which is exactly what it sounds like, people. But trails and such were not in long supply. And so we ran over and around and up and down Mount Trashmore to get a 5K in my youth. So very exciting to see how collaborative this work is across the region. And lovely to see you, Whitney, representing Hampton Roads. With that, we're going to move on to our last presentation of the day. And again, this has been such a joyful sort of agenda to lead today. I want to welcome Rob Bradley from Ernst & Young. Mr. Bradley is a managing director in the climate sustainability practice at Ernst & Young and is here to share with us today a new initiative to set up a carbon measure program. We'd like to learn a bit more about the impetus for this work and how it might enable private companies with climate action and leadership. Mr. Bradley, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure joining you all today, and thanks for the opportunity. I'm going to talk about accounting because that is the reward for a good and virtuous life. But I'd just like to say that we have the pleasure of supporting a number of different players at state and local level with CPRG and related activities, including currently with the state of Georgia. And it's great to see this kind of activity still continuing so strongly at state and local level across the US. So yeah, my name is Rob Bradley. I'm at EY. I'm not an accountant, which is a caveat I like to throw in early in the discussions. I spent about 3 years of my career at EY, but I spent about 12 in the World Resources Institute, and I've had the pleasure of working with Clay and others a lot over the years. So great to be part of the discussion here. I think, first of all, are you able to see the screen share? Lovely.
We can.
So I'm, I've been asked to give a little bit of an update on some of the developments that are going on in the world of carbon accounting. So, strap in, it's going to be a white knuckle ride. I want to start by caveating that all of this is very, very much under development. So what we have is a couple of major initiatives going on that haven't even set hard timelines for themselves yet, but I would anticipate will be yielding results over the next, say, 2 years. So there'll be lively discussion around this topic, but this isn't something that is going to imminently transform the way everybody's doing business. Nevertheless, there's a huge amount of effort going into the measurement and disclosure of greenhouse gases and other sustainability-related metrics right now. Certainly, with our private sector clients, that is by far the dominant trend in what they're doing, to the point where, ironically, it leaves very little oxygen for actually doing things in many cases, because the disclosure work is certainly demanding. And so the emergence of these accounting standards is both an indicator of and potentially a driver of greater seriousness as C-suites pay more attention to greenhouse gases. So up until today, the world of corporate greenhouse gas accounting has been dominated by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. That's a standard initially developed by the World Resources Institute and the World Business Council on sustainable development. In the last couple of years, it's actually been launched with a new structure and a more independent governance, but nevertheless, it remains essentially the creature that has been in place over the last 20 years. It has succeeded beyond its wildest dreams in the sense that it became not just a de facto voluntary standard, but is now widely adopted by regulators, or referenced at least by regulators, as they set disclosure-related requirements. And it has, for this purpose, the key characteristic that it asks companies to account for and essentially, to some extent, take responsibility for emissions not only directly within their own processes, so from their factories, from their boilers, from their chemical processes or whatever it may be, but also for the broader impact they have across their value chains. So the emissions embodied in the products they buy, in users of the products they sell, in the business travel of their employees, and a number of other categories. That has some wonderful advantages. It means that maximum accountability is established. If multiple companies potentially have influence over a given ton of emissions, each of them has some incentive to exert that influence. It has some challenges that, for instance, because multiple companies can quote unquote own a given ton of emissions, that sometimes makes integrating it with more formal accounting systems trickier. It can sometimes make it harder as well to distinguish properly between lower or higher carbon versions of the same products. So a debate, or at least a series of initiatives, have emerged that are aimed at addressing this. If we get it right, a carbon accounting system can be helpful on a number of levels. It can help companies to develop and market lower carbon commodities where there's a willingness to buy those in the market. Through that, it can help accelerate decarbonization by giving buyers a range of options to choose from in reducing the carbon footprint of the things that they buy. That in itself can help provide incentives for increased capital investment. There are a number of regulatory frameworks that will benefit from having increasingly accurate carbon footprinting, the most notable of which is the carbon border adjustment mechanism in the EU, but a number of others are emerging. And of course, it can underpin robust policy. So what is an e-ledger? An e-ledger attempts to apply to carbon accounting a strong analog of what is done with financial accounting. So the idea is that you would account for carbon at the point of origination, so at the point at which you bring the oil out of the ground or you emit from the smokestack. And at that point, that ton of carbon dioxide is held within a ledger in the same way that a financial ledger works for companies. As companies then trade with each other, trading a raw material, for instance, or buying power, that particular ton of carbon flows directly from one company's ledger to another. At any given point in time, only one company, quote, owns that ton of carbon, and any trade that involves moving the carbon-intensive product or service along the value chain results in the carbon ton being passed as well. The idea here is that this will mean that normal processes that are applied to finances, including double book accounting and the audit trail, will then apply to greenhouse gases. So I won't belabor the point, but as you can see here, this means that in principle, through this vision, you would have a stream of carbon from different sources that would be coming in attached to the fuels that you buy, the raw materials that you buy, the electricity that you use. Those would be transferred onto your ledger. And then as you produce a product, every one of those tons would essentially be assigned to those products. So if you happen to be a particularly efficient producer of a given chemical product or of a ton of steel, you would be in a position to credibly market that as a lower carbon footprint version of that product. In order to pursue this idea, a new alliance known as Carbon Measures has been established. It's a coalition today, I would say, of about 25 partners, largely of companies in highly emitting industries. There was a soft launch of that in Sao Paulo and Belém over the last couple of weeks around the COP30 conference. And the idea is that they are they're going to be bringing a multi-stakeholder group together to explore what the implications and features of this system might be. Right now, they're in a process of establishing a technical advisory committee that will actually be under the auspices of the International Chamber of Commerce. And as I say, two years seems about the credible time frame for how that will come in. It's worth mentioning that the Greenhouse Gas Protocol is not standing still and is also exploring a number of the same issues. So around the same time, in fact, this was formally announced in New York just this past September, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and ISO announced a strategic partnership to further develop their standards. First of all, to unify those standards in a way that provides hopefully a more coherent rule book for companies, but also to explore many of the same topics. So how do you establish proper carbon footprints for individual products in ways that are credible and that will allow companies to make verifiable claims about the carbon intensity of those products. There's no particular reason why these different processes need be conflicting. But of course, with any new process, there are lots of people with lots of different ideas of where this is going to end up. Again, this alliance is in the process of building more technical advisory capacity. At the moment, there's an open call for advisors. We expect that will probably take a couple of years to produce updated standards as well. So just to kind of give a quick snapshot of how these compare, there's a difference that's practically philosophical The Greenhouse Gas Protocol, again, has a very comprehensive view of what should count as emissions for which a company is accountable, including things well beyond its direct control, but many emissions over which it has some potential for indirect control through its suppliers, its customers, or what have you. It does involve double counting. If you start adding up all the different emissions of different companies, there's a lot of overlap. A given ton of emissions might well be a sold product for one company, a bought product for another, maybe part of their direct processes for yet another. That is a feature, not a bug, for the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. The idea is to maximize that incentive for action. There are a number of challenges that are more to do with the way it's implemented. There are choices that companies get to have about when you count a particular activity as under your control. You can choose whether you have financial control or operational control over it. Those are things that can be, I think, settled by particular regulators. The e-liabilities approach is much more to do with trying to make sure that there is a non-overlapping exclusive ownership of a given ton of carbon in a way that can be captured through the value chain. The challenges here, I think, are going to be when you look at the vast array of different sources that there are for emissions and the vast array of different players who ultimately, if you like, consume those emissions. Then the question of who maintains these ledgers and who is responsible for them is likely to be a complex one. But nevertheless, a lot of effort is going to be poured into this, and be prepared for the world of accounting to be more exciting than you imagined.
All right. I wasn't sure, Rob, if that was like the last slide, the big accounting, is for everyone slide. I want to put it.
I have no aspirations to make it that fun.
But it's interesting. I mean, it is a key piece, right? If we're going to do all this work, we have to measure it somehow and account for it. So I can't quite see all of the group, but please unmute yourself. Oh, there we go. Group's back. If anybody has questions, comments for our presenter. I see a little bit of movement. If staff had any other questions or comments or follow-up on this item, I think it's a new topic for me, certainly. So something I'll want to probably look at, outside the confines of these slides. I just saw Sarah's camera come up. Sarah, did you have a comment?
Just a question. I assume you'll have to handle leakage. The ton of carbon doesn't sort of stay the same throughout the chain necessarily. So I was just interested how that was being addressed, or whether.
So with the e-liabilities model, the idea is that the ton of carbon does indeed stay the same right the way through the value chain. When you say leakage, so that term is normally used to mean that emissions increase elsewhere because of the cost of reducing emissions here. What are you? Could you just expand a little bit on the question there?
Well, so I meant more. You put the example of where the carbon's extracted, but like there's leakage in natural gas transmission, or in less as much in electricity transmission. You may have product throughout the chain. There might be inefficiencies throughout the chain of production where you're losing it. So that's sort of where it's extracted as a ton of carbon, but it may not get to the end product as a ton of carbon.
Gotcha. Yeah, apologies. I misunderstood the question. So the idea, and I don't want to trivialize the complexity of doing it in practice, but the idea is that no, that would be very much part of the calculation and the accounting of a ton of carbon throughout. So for instance, I've used carbon and carbon dioxide as shorthands. This would include, for instance, measuring any methane leakage from pipelines and including that as quote carbon that's in the ledger. It would include, if you're buying electricity, the carbon associated with that electricity would be calculated in such a way as to take account of transmission losses or other inefficiencies. Again, I don't want to imply that that's going to be straightforward. I think part of the accounting in a very broad sense that a reasonable person would understand it is a broader concept than accounting the way accountants sometimes talk about it. So there's a piece of the accounting that's very much about when are you measuring directly and when are you estimating. So a lot of the challenges that we have now are less about accounting in the sense of is this being accurately kept in a bookkeeping sense, and more, well, right now, how much waste does an individual employee in my Atlanta office generate? No idea. I'll use a standard coefficient. And right now, these are the exciting debates that we get to have with auditors, right? So, I mean, just in the last couple of months, I was working with a company and it said, here's my greenhouse gas emissions. I've got an office in Spain. Here's the waste generated per person. But they were using a coefficient that was based on American consumption levels, and the auditor said that's not good enough. The idea behind a lot of this is that the estimates would be replaced by real measurement. Many of those who are working most actively on this right now are extremely large, heavy production companies. They do tend to have excellent data over the things that they're doing because those are incredibly, big, expensive processes. When you get to these things like, what do my employees' commuting patterns look like, or what have you, that gets a lot more complex. So I think there is a question as to how far down the value chain, some of the measurement ideas will be practical. Does that properly answer your question, Sarah?
Yes, thank you.
I'm scanning really quick. Just to see. Well, Rob, thank you so much for your work in this space and for coming to share it with us. This is definitely a day about new ideas and new coalitions. And so it was really great to have you here and to start to understand a little bit for myself and probably for others, a little more on the topic of, accounting and e-ledgers. We really appreciate it and good luck with your work ahead.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, so moving on now to updates. We have shared our written updates in advance of the meeting, and I hope you've had a chance to look on the committee website where those are posted. The remaining time here is to provide any additional details or color on those updates or to ask questions of the various supporting committee leads. We'll also hear from staff on a couple of very quick report outs. I'm going to open it up, and then Jeff, if I could sort of hand the meeting to you for just a moment. I need to step away for just a moment. So if you wouldn't mind running things for a few minutes with the updates, and I'll be right back.
Sure, absolutely. I see William Washburn. You have your camera on. Do you want to give an update from ACPAC? Bill, you're muted.
Oh, Jeff, can you hear me?
There
Okay.
we
Hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about that. As I was saying, ACPAC held its bi-monthly meeting on this past Monday, the 17th. And we had a presentation from COG's staff on the draft Environmental Justice Toolkit refresh, EJ Toolkit 2, I guess. It's what you might refer to it as. And just to refresh everyone's memory about the EJ Toolkit, CEEPC in 2023 authorized ACPAC to pursue updating the 2017 EJ Toolkit. So it's it's about time. It's been 8 years since the original toolkit was done, and because of that fact and that some time has passed, we basically the COGS focus on climate and energy, and our team led a number of different efforts with equity and environmental justice as a focal point. So this is the first draft of the toolkit refresh. It was presented to us at our meeting and also shared with ACPAC members. So we are currently, ACPAC members are currently, we have our bite at the apple this week. Deadline for written comments to COG staff is this coming Friday, 21st of November. And at that time, afterwards, staff is going to review comments and they will release a second draft of the EJ EJ toolkit to CAR committees, including CEEPC and BAC, along with community-based organizations. And that review will take place over the coming over the coming holiday season, if you will. So that's always a challenging time for getting work done. But at any rate, the final version of the revised EJ toolkit is expected to be presented at our January ACPAC meeting, and I believe that meeting will be on the 26th of January, if I'm correct. We also received a presentation from the Energy Justice Lab out of Indiana University, and this is their research and programs relating to household energy insecurity, or to put it in plain English, who stands to suffer hardship from the possibility of utility cutoffs because people can't pay the bills. And I understand that Leah Boggs of COG staff has initiated a parallel discussion that will focus on LIHEAP that will take place tomorrow, and I believe the presenter from Monday has been invited to take place in that discussion as well, if possible, and Leah can provide further details on that in terms of what's what. The presentation was was a subject of much interest on the part of ACPAC members because of these challenges around utility insecurities, particularly for low and moderate income families, and the issue of utility cutoffs and how what metrics you use to keep track of that issue, and the solutions that are developed to come up with it. So we'll be continuing to monitor that work as well. Also, at Monday's meeting, in my role as the current chair of ACPAC, I appointed a subcommittee to develop a slate of nominations for existing membership. William Marsh and I, he's my vice chair. Our terms both come to an end. In January, and so we'll hopefully have a slate of nominations for chair and vice chair for 2026, and I believe for 2026 the chair will be rotating to the state of Maryland. And finally, we're initiating effort to recruit new members for ACPAC, and that campaign will start next month. The only basic requirement is that applicants for membership on ACPAC must live within the COG service region. Our next meeting, as I said before, is the 26th of January. If you have questions, you can contact Leah Boggs. And that concludes my update from ACPAC. I want to thank you. And if you have any, as I said, have any questions, you can contact Leah.
Thank you, sir. I know I had to step away for a moment, but are we moving through, or is regional electric vehicle deployment next? Do we have
Chair,
someone from that group?
Chair Bagley,
Yeah.
Valerie Amore from for BIAC, the co-vice chair, is
Yeah.
on the line as well. So if she can give a quick update, we would
Perfect.
appreciate it.
Go right ahead, Valerie. Hi.
Hi, good morning, Sarah. Hi, so good morning and thank you. I'm Valerie Moore. I'm the energy manager with the city of Alexandria and co-vice chair of BIAC. I am filling in for the chair, Al Carr, with DC. So BIAC will meet tomorrow for a robust meeting. Our first discussion item is on energy assistance programs, where we will have panelists representing state a low-income energy assistance program, LIHEAP, agencies, area utilities, and the National Energy Assistant Directors Association. As energy utility bills are increasing for residents, state and local governments are navigating the complexities of funding shortages for their community-focused programs. The panel will discuss the status of state energy assistance programs and considerations for alternatives for assistance. The next main topic is going to be on battery energy storage systems, and we will hear from the Clean Energy States Alliance, who will provide a comparative review of state energy storage procurement mandates, targets, and goals. Staff is considering building the battery energy storage discussion as a series. We'll get feedback during our meeting tomorrow from the BIAC members on their interest. The committee will change leadership in 2026, so more changes, and the determination on new leadership will be finalized in December. BIAC's next meeting is in February. And that concludes my update. And I also would like to express from my committee and leadership, happy holidays to everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Okay, so moving through an order here, do we have the RevD group?
I
And
can provide a brief update on that.
thank you.
Yep. So we had our last meeting, which was on October 23rd. We had presentations from Montgomery County and DC on their pilot programs for food truck electrification, and Alexandria also presented on their multifamily charging pilot program. I think that is all. Any other updates are in the written. And I also need to provide the legislative committee update, which we didn't get to yet. For members who do not know, or if you do, CEEPC has a legislative committee that is a small group of CEEPC members who periodically meet with staff to review legislative initiatives in Maryland, Virginia, and DC. COG staff tracks bills during the legislative session, and we generally have a kickoff call in January, but I wanted to get out ahead of that this year because that often happens after the legislative sessions have started. So if there are any members that are interested in taking part in that committee, feel free to contact me and we can talk about that. And then there will be a larger presentation on this at the beginning of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And yeah, there's often a lot of moving parts in tracking legislation and viable legislation and things that we do and we sign off on and send letters on. So if you have interest in that, CEEPC often sends letters supporting legislation that has a chance to be successful. Thank you for those updates. That brings us to the Greater Washington Region Clean Cities Coalition.
Yeah, it looks like Antoine is not on the line. go ahead and skip that one. Just to say they recently had a nice annual meeting in Prince George's County, well attended, and he's doing great work.
Great. Recycling.
I'm not sure I see John Snar on the. Yeah, it looks like John Snar is not on the line.
Okay. Well, then our last possibility is the Regional Tree Canopy Subcommittee.
Sure. Yeah, this is Heidi Bonifant, and the Tree Canopy Subcommittee is meeting monthly. So last month we were learning about DC's tree preservation laws for their heritage trees and special trees, which was really interesting. And then yesterday we met and we're talking about funding for tree canopy plantings and forestry programs and some sort of unique ways to get funding. And one was Fairfax County presented on their tax service districts. They have Virginia enabling legislation to develop service districts, and so this is like a tiny fraction of funding that comes from tax assessments. Property tax assessments goes towards like a pest management program and a stormwater service district in Fairfax County, and how those are helping to fund the tree programs there, both planting and for stormwater and water quality reasons, and then also the pest management against some 9 pests, which include like the spongy moth and and more recently monitoring for the spotted lanternfly, which a lot of people are aware of. So, and then there's others as well. So, yeah, those are the main things, and we're still working on developing the action plan strategies. And these are just 2 of the areas that it's going to focus on is securing funding, and then also the preservation aspect. Thanks.
Thank you, Heidi. And it sounds like we're on to staff. So Jeff, do you want to share updates for 2026?
Yeah, sure. So 2 things. One, everybody get ready at some point. Robert or I will be sending out a note about the auto show, which I think Public Policy Day, I think is January 22nd. So we'll be working to secure a room and come up with an agenda to focus on electric vehicles and get a chance to tour the auto show for those who are interested. The other thing that's and you heard a bit about it on Maya's talk on CPRG is the data center. There was an ad hoc work group helping Maya with that measure within the CCAP. But our executive director has asked that we work on coming up with a kind of a workshop seminar series in 2026. So in my case, I'll be trying to tee up a meeting probably in February focused on the energy piece of that. There's going to be a separate meeting on the water implication, and then I think the final meeting will be associated with land use and economic development. Data centers are a big issue. There's today a big meeting at the PJM. There's a big decision about how large loads like data centers contribute to the cost of the grid, and there's a lot of concern and interest related to what data centers are doing to the cost of electricity. So really important topic. To this point, most, if not all, of the data centers have gone into Loudoun County, so a kind of one jurisdiction issue, but we're having a jump the river. There's going to be a big data center in Frederick County soon. There's interest, a lot of resistance to data centers in Prince George's County, and Charles County is interested in it. Prince William's teed up to get a lot of data centers. So I think the time has come to really increase our capacity to address the myriad of issues that come along with that whole topic. So that's it.
Well, thank you for Jeff for those updates, and I think it is important work ahead. So we're prepared for and to understand best practices there. Thank you, everyone, for attending today, for the discussion, to our presenters. I'm really pleased that we sort of ended our year here with a lot of forward-looking, collaborative efforts being made around the country and around the world, and I hope we can take that energy into 2026. Our next meeting will be virtual at 10 a.m. on January 28th. Upcoming other events, just to highlight, we do have the Thursday, January 22nd, 2026 is the Public Policy Day at the Auto Show. So mark that on your calendar. We'll meet again on January 28th, and then March 25th, May 27th, July 29th, September 23rd, and November 18th. And with that, and not seeing any other objections or comments or hands, thank you all for being here, for all of your work and care in this space. Have a great holidays, and we'll see you next year. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Chair Bagley.